we're going to go down the line, and everyone's going to explain what law. I only met the three in the beginning, and Kathy, Dr. Fink from DOH, Don Chang from DLNR,
Jessica from SHPD.
Jessica from SHPD, Kea, I know him from school, so. And then Kamakana from OHA. And so they're gonna go down and explain their roles, what happened, and then I have a list of questions that I will ask for each one. And so how it will go is I'll ask the questions that are already were collected, gathered, follow-up questions if they're necessary. So even if you, in your presentation, presenters, you have answered the question, I want you to restate the answer anyway, so that we can write it down, have recordings, have it so that we can, look at it and we can address it to, depending on what happens after. If I miss anything, if there's anything that is pertinent to that department, that thing that I have missed that you want to ask about this specific area, this specific situation, you can either raise your hand and you can come to the mic and ask the question, or you can go to Pualoke and Kiele in the corner, and they can go and type down your question, and then they can give it to me and I can ask it, and that's how we can do this. Yeah, so remember, we want to focus. We have till 6:30. At 6:30, we'll have Launa time, where you can come and actually talk to the people that are here. And in the end, we also want suggestions. If you have a legislative suggestion, some other type of suggestion on how to write that down, because we're going to also transcribe this and have transmittals to all these offices of these suggestions. We already have a set of them, so don't worry if you repeat it. We will go and cull all the suggestions and make sure that they're concise, clear, and maybe we can do something about it legislatively. We don't know. We have Rep Nakamura here. We also have our Rep Dan Ohuna from OHA in the back there as well. So we have ways to address these things. Yeah, so that is how the meeting is going to go. And so there is time for you to ask questions about this space. But remember, we want to keep it clean and concise on this issue right now. We are focusing on this so that we can maybe extrapolate from this situation and use it in other places so that it doesn't happen anywhere else in Hawaii. We are not a special case. This is a Aina-wide issue, and it will become more of an issue as we go down, as we go through the years. So that's how it's going to be. Maikai? Everybody kako all the rules? Okay, mahalo nui a kakoa pau. So we will start with Shipti, with Chair Chang. You can talk about the situation, the processes, as well as the how we got to where we're at today.
Okay. Mahalo. Aloha mai kako. My name is Don Chang, and I am the chair of the Board of Land and Natural Resources. I appreciate the opportunity to be out here. I just went out to the site, so I have seen it firsthand. So, I've introduced Jessica Puff. She is the administrator of the State Historic Preservation Division. Jordan Kea Calpito is the branch chief for the History and Culture branch. So I'm going to briefly go over what the statute says, what our kuleana is, and then I'm going to tell you what we did. Okay? So let me briefly describe the project as we now know it. It involved 3 cesspool conversions to septic tanks and 3 leach fields to service about 3 to 4 cottages and utility connections on a private residence of approximately 0.7 acres. There are 3 separate TMKs. That's why each property needed its own septic tank and leach field conversion, its own septic tank and leach field. So what is our kuleana as SHPD? Chapter 6E 43.6 subparagraph 6 talks about an inadvertent burial discovery. These were inadvertent burials. We have 2 types of burials. A previously identified is one that we normally find in the context of archaeological inventory survey. We do a planning, we find a burial, but these burials, we found they were inadvertent. We found them during construction. It does require that when a burial is discovered, that SHPD is notified. It also requires that the appropriate police department or medical examiner or coroner is notified. And as soon as practicable, the department shall notify the following appropriate council and Office of Hawaiian Affairs. After notification of the discovery of multiple skeletons, the following shall be done within 2 working days on Oahu or 3 working days in other jurisdictions. So for these burials, we found more than one, so it required us within 3 days to do the following. 1, a representative of the medical examiner or coroner's office and a qualified archaeologist shall examine the remains to determine jurisdiction. For DLNR, jurisdiction is it's over 50 years old, it's human, and there's special rules that apply if it's Native Hawaiian. If the remains are the responsibility of the medical examiner or coroner, less than 50 years old, and it does not appear to be a historic burial, the department's responsibility shall end, and then the police and the medical examiner do what they need to do. However, if it's more than 50 years old and it's determined to be human, and our archaeologists determine that, the department shall gather sufficient information, including oral tradition, to document the nature of the burial context and determine the appropriate treatment of the remains. Members of the appropriate burial council shall be allowed to oversee the on-site examination and, if warranted, removal. Subpart 3 applies if we're going to remove the burial. A determination had been made to preserve the burials in place. So let me tell you what we found and what we did. So on June 25th, the contract archaeologist notified SHPD of the inadvertent burial discovery during the installation of tank number 1. Kauai Police Department was notified. All work in the vicinity of the area of tank number 1 and the leach field stopped. Then they proceeded to tank number 2. The burial council member was also notified. The next day, on June 26, the contract archaeologist notified SHPD that approximately, I think it was 2 in situ burials, meaning that's where the burial was originally buried. 2 in situ burials and burial fragments consisting of 3 more burials were found in tank number 2. And so work stopped. And then our archaeologists, the DLNR's SHPD archaeologists, conducted a site visit, confirmed that they were human, went out to tank number 2, confirmed that they were human, they were likely to be over 50 years old. It was SHPD's jurisdiction, based upon the burial context, determined that they were probably more likely to be Native Hawaiian. The archaeologists also confirmed during their site visit that there were 2 in situ burials identified at tank number 2 and the leach field. Possibly more individuals' bone fragments were also identified. They sent a notification information to SHPD burial sites specialists, and a determination was to preserve those burials in place. So they have not been relocated. Again, we went out to the site today. As far as we know, the burials have been preserved in place. There are protective measures. There's a plywood over them. The sand has been filled back into, and the tanks have been installed in both tank number 1 and tank number 2. The tanks have been installed. Leach field for tank number 1 is still open. Leach field for tank number 2 has been closed. After these discoveries, numerous situations, further activities occurred. GPR was done at the request of community members, so the landowner approved the authorization of GPR. They determined that it was very difficult to find that the GPR was not, could not confirm human burials or not. So they continued on with, they screened all of this, the sediment, the sand that they found before they put it back into leach field number 2, as well as tank number 2. On September 25th, and I know that is sometime afterwards, on September 25th, our state archaeologists went out on the site, confirmed a burial, the concentration or burial clusters in tank number 5, 2 in situ and three burials that appeared to be representing 3 different individuals. They were preserved in place. They also, they were permitted to complete tank number 3, which is further Mauka in the property. No burials were discovered in tank number 3 or the leach field. So currently, the current status is tank number 2, the leach field and the tank has been installed. The current status of is tank number 1, the tank has been installed, but the leach field is still open. Tank number 3, the tank has been installed and the leach field has also been completed. So that's the current situation of, as we understand it. There may be additional information that perhaps Kea may want to provide if he's got more, as well as Jessica, but that's an overview of both what our kuleana is with respect to inadvertence, what we found, and then what the current status. That's okay? All right. We'll be available for questions.
Okay, yeah, so we'll have questions after, so if you're mulling your question, like I said, I have the list of questions for everybody after, but I want each department to go, and we have Ka'aina from the county right here, so he just came in, so we'll also have the county talk to after DOH. So DOH, if you can go.
Okay. Aloha kako. Again, my name is Kenny Fink with the Department of Health, and I'm with Kathy Ho, also with the Department of Health. So just a little bit of a step back. So there's a state law that requires cesspool conversions, and that new construction would have individual wastewater systems other than cesspools. And for this reason, we anticipate that this is a situation that could recur, so it's important that we learn from this and try and prevent this from occurring in the future. Our process, and I'll ask Kathy to just double check me, is when there are applications to put in an individual wastewater system or convert a cesspool, there is an application that is submitted to the Department of Health. It includes an attestation that the applier or applicant is compliant with the requirements of the cultural and customary practices of Native Hawaiians. Through this process, we've learned that is inadequate. So we're looking to improve that. Okay. So what happened in this case is the application came through, the person attested that they were issued approval to construct, which resulted in the inadvertent discovery. And then once they did, it kind of went into SHPD's jurisdiction. The landowner did comply. As I understand, they stopped work and made the report and consulted with SHPD. During this process, we learned last week, or I'm sorry, the week before that, when we were consulted by OHA, that there were concerns about the current situation. We subsequently had discussions with SHPD, and at their request, while there were some questions of who had the authority to pause the work, I directed the issuance of a letter to pause the work so we could clarify that there was compliance with the 6E requirements, and that it was important to just, while we were figuring out who had what authority to kind of do what, and this was an opportunity since then to learn from that. I felt that this was a situation where it was best to err on the side of caution and just pause the work and not let us not having that clarification delay potentially something happening that we could have avoided. Okay, so we asked for the pause in work, and then we had the opportunity between DOH and DLNR and SHPD, and we spent a lot of time connecting in the interim. We received additional clarification. There was a subsequent letter that was sent to clarify additional consultation. And as a result of that and the landowner's cooperation and indication of their intent to continue to cooperate, we subsequently rescinded our DOH letter to let the process return to the continued consultation with SHPD. So that was kind of where we are today with this particular case. As far as preventing this of another situation in the future, we have, again, been actively working with the LNR, SHPD. We're going to work to add additional kind of criteria within the application process to identify more sensitive areas or areas that might be higher risk of inadvertent discovery. So we can get that process over to SHPD for review in advance. And then with that process, they can also add additional conditions, which they were not afforded the opportunity in this case. So that if there is an inadvertent discovery, it would be subject to those conditions to ensure that that is adhered to and mitigation is successfully completed. Once that process is concluded, SHPD would notify DOH, and it would be only upon then that DOH would then issue its authority to use the system. So we're putting in checks and balances and having some system redundancy to avoid any gaps, to really try to avoid a situation like this happening again. So the situation did highlight limitations of the current process. We're trying to get through this the best we can together in a Pono matter, and it is foremost our responsibility to learn from it and put steps in place so we are able to much better avoid a situation like this recurring. I don't know if you want anything.
Now we'll hear from County Planning.
How's it all? Kamealoha on behalf of the Planning Department for the County of Kauai. Sorry I was a little late. I'm not sure if it should have started with the county or started with the state, but essentially with zoning permits, the Planning Department for any proposal of zoning permit, and the zoning permit is required whenever you're proposing a new structure, expanding a structure, or proposing a brand new use. So an array of different zoning permits can be triggered from a class 1 to a class 4, some requiring public hearings, some not. But anytime there's ground penetrating activity, any one of those class 1 to 4 zoning permits will be routed to SHPD for their review and assessment before action is taken. So that's, in a nutshell, what happens with any type of development from a county permitting standpoint. And then what type of archaeological or EV or other cultural resources that may be in the area, we essentially rely on SHPD to give us input on any mitigation, any studies, assessments that need to be done as part of the proposal, and rely on that as a requirement of the zoning permit. In this situation, because it was a renovation, there was no zoning permit triggered. And so ultimately, there was nothing referenced or sent over to SHPD from the planning department concerning development on this property. Because again, renovations don't require brand new zoning permits. I can say, in light of what's happened out here, that I've asked staff and our attorney's office to review whether or not septic systems really should be exempted from renovations. If it's a hard and fast, no, they are exempted, then indeed there is no reference, there's no permit trigger. But if it has been an interpret, and this has been going, I know well before I started as planning director, cesspool conversions into septic systems were not considered development and were considered exempt under a renovation status. And I think from a standpoint of an environmental protection standpoint, that comes from a good place. But if it's not a hard and fast requirement and it's leaving open the potential for septic conversions without appropriate review by SHPD and being routed to SHPD, it's something that I think some of my other competitors are saying, is we need to make that adjustment, and we're looking at that right now.
Okay, and then finally we have OHA when they got involved too, and then we'll start with questions right after this.
All right, aloha. I'm Kamakana Ferreira. I'm the lead compliance specialist with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. So how OHA fits into all of this, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the chapter, Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 10, but in 10-3, there's a specific statutory mandate for OHA to assess the policies and practices of other agencies, specifically those practices that are impacting on Native Hawaiians. And so typically how this is done at OHA is that every week there's mail that comes in from different agencies or developers asking us to review permits and to provide comments that are recommendations. If we see things that will possibly impact Native Hawaiians, cultural resources, subsurface or on the surface. And so we review those types of things that come into the office. Sometimes they also include environmental reviews, historic preservation stuff, like all the time. I'd say on average we get anywhere between 500 to 700 pieces of mail per year from different agencies or developers. But that's not everything that's out there. And so sometimes we do rely on the community to report things to us because not everything is coming to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Like in this particular case, the permits that the DOH was issuing, we weren't asked to consult on it, so we didn't know what was going on until like well after. I think after the discovery on September 25th, I think as Don had mentioned, in the administrative rules, 13300-40 for the inadvertent discoveries, OHA is supposed to be notified for inadvertent discoveries. They did notify us in this particular case back on June 25th and the 26th, but at that time, we didn't hear anything coming in from the community, and the determination was to preserve in place. And so unless we have insight from the community to let us know what's going on, it's hard for us to take action because we also have a lot of other projects to review at the same time. We knew that this one, though, after the discovery on September 25th, there was a lot of community chatter. There was a lot of stuff online. And so that's when we kind of like mobilized to take action on what was going on. So we contacted SHPD because they have the enforcement authority over inadvertent discoveries. And we don't have enforcement authority. We can make recommendations. We're assessing the policies and practices tied back to our 10-3 mandate. And so in this particular case, we needed more information. And so that's what we did after the September 25th discovery. We were trying to find out information. Was the police department contacted? Were we contacted? Were the MOCA representatives involved? Were they consulted? And was there a determination letter that was made? And so I'd say after about a week, we got some of that information. SHPD provided us with a determination letter and assured us that the police department was contacted. We reviewed the determination letter, and when we reviewed it, it looked like the MOCA rep was consulted in this particular case and had a recommendation to preserve in place. At least that's what was in writing in the determination letter. And so at least on the procedural level, things looked okay in that sense. But we also needed to look at the permit side, and so we reached out to the Department of Health. Stacy, we had a meeting with Dr. Fink, And we went over their permit process, and as Dr. Fink explained, their permit process essentially just had a checkbox for whether or not there was any cultural resources on top of the property. And we felt like that was a problematic process, and we're trying to work with them, and they're trying to work with SHPD to improve that so this doesn't happen again in the future. And so I think, though, along the lines of OHA making recommendations as part of our 10-3 mandate, we're asking for additional consultation in this particular case. We're asking to see if additional exploratory testing can be done. And just convening this group right here, I think this is part of the process of what OHA is trying to do. And so that's it from OHA's perspective on that.
Okay, so now it's question and answer time. So like I said, I'm gonna have a list of questions from the community. I'm gonna go through them, and I'll have extra ones too that I jotted down. And then after, if I don't, we're gonna go through SHPD, DLNR, Burial Council questions. If there are questions for that set of people and I'm done, and you have them, you can come up and ask that question about this situation, or go to the table in the corner if you don't wanna come to the mic. Okay, Maikai? Okay, so, we heard a lot about, that things were determined, things were, they made a determination. So the question is, our first question is, what steps will SHPD, DLNR make to make sure that lineal and cultural descendants are involved in the protection and preservation, ensuring that their presence and authority in these cases involving Iwi and Kūpuna, especially at Naue, are there? Because, this is a perfect example that determinations were made, but descendants were not involved. So that's the question.
Jordan, okay, you want to answer that? I'll add.
So, all right. So, what SHPD does consult with recognized. The important word is recognized. Recognized lineal and cultural descendants. If SHPD doesn't do it directly, they give the information to the archaeological firm to do consultations with recognized lineal and cultural descendants. And I say the important word is recognized because in our process, recognized means that they went to the council, the respective burial council, which would be the KNIBC, for the formal recognition. For Wainiha, we had 8 recognized descendants, but in terms of making sure that from this point forward, we will be working with, I guess, with Nancy if she continues on, and as well as having our staff here on Kauai reach out directly to those individuals and to see what they would see as appropriate treatment. I would also encourage any other descendants to also go through the application process.
If I can, Kamealoha, just add a little bit more to that. So, this is an unusual circumstance. This is an inadvertent. We have 3 days to make a determination. We are all trying to collectively be more proactive, both with DOH. Our preference is avoid inadvertence. So we should try to get them ahead of time. So I think with this new, I think we are all between us, DOH and the county, we're looking at how do we fold the DOH permit conversion process into the SHPD review process. I think that in the future, that will help us be more proactive. Whether you have to do an archaeological inventory survey ahead of time, where you're going to put the tanks in the leach field so we know that it's clean before you put it, whether it's consultation with lineal and cultural descendants. So there are a lot more safeguards when we do it at the early stage, being more proactive. So we do believe that this collective government agencies, and I'm sorry that this happened here, and that people were, those of you who felt offended or hurt, by what happened over there in Wainiha. Wasn't our intention. But it was a hard lesson learned for us. We got to be more proactive. But with the proactive, it would be a previously identified burial, meaning that that's a decision made by the burial council. Versus if it's an inadvertent, that's made by SHPD in consultation with others. So one, we're trying to deal with in the future, how do we move forward so this doesn't happen? To address your question about how do we involve lineal and cultural descendants, there is a process for their engagement. In this particular situation, because it's an inadvertent, DLNR has asked for a stop that we are wanting to do like this hosted meeting by OHA, mahalo for that. But we will be, I think Kea is going to send to the archaeologists, those families that have been recognized in Wainiha, consult with them, and then try to get their mana'o before a final decision is made on what's appropriate mitigation. So moving forward, we think we have a better plan to be more proactive. Wainiha burials, we're going to do consultation, either SHPD or the contract archaeologists will consult with those recognized cultural descendants from Wainiha to try to engage them with this process.
And so the follow-up question is, the HRS says in order to become a recognized, you need to have the burial council approve them. And in order to have that, you have to have a meeting. In order to have a meeting, you need to have quorum. In order to have quorum, you need 6 people. So the question is, how do we get to that point of recognize lineal and cultural descendants if we cannot initiate that process?
Okay. I'll answer, and then I'll let Jessica and Kea follow. That is a really good question. Kauai is not the only one that has problems with burial councils. Oahu, we've had to cancel meetings, so we recognize we have to do a better job. We're working with the boards and commissions. I would urge all of you, any of you who's interested in serving, submit your application. I know that OHA has expressed an interest to try to work with the communities to build up that application pool. So that's one, how do we get people to sit on burial councils? 2, what do we do with this current situation where, in particular, Kauai hasn't met, and I'm embarrassed to say, 2 years. That's really not acceptable. So I cannot change back the hands of time. It is what it is. So how do we move forward? I think Kea them are coming up with a better process to still have meetings. And maybe, Kea, you might want to describe that. We may not be able to take action, but you can still have a meeting.
So first, specific to the KNIBC, I have been working with boards and commissions and the governor's liaison for Kauai. We do have some paperwork that needed to get filed for 2 of the members. So I think by hopefully as soon as they turn in their oath of offices, the KNIBC will have 5 fully on board members, and we'll have quorum. In the past, if we had an anticipated lack of quorum, the meetings would be canceled. Just because no decisions could be made, but from this point forward, what we're going to do is whether we have an anticipated lack of quorum or not, we'll leave it up to the chair on whether or not they want to continue the meeting as planned. However, if at the start of the meeting that day, there is still no quorum, the chair can opt to receive testimony from the public, although no discussion or deliberation can take place, no voting can take place, but they can continue to receive testimony. The only downside to that would be, and what we're trying to figure out how to address is that we wouldn't want to mislead the community into thinking that decisions will be made at a council meeting only for them to find out that morning after taking off from work, taking off from school, that we had known in advance that there may not have been a quorum. So we're finding out how to address that particular situation, but we will try and move forward so that the councils can at least meet as they want to, although again, they may not be able to make determinations if they do not have quorum for the meetings.
One minute. I just want to address this question, because the question was, how do you get determination, but the determination has to do with advertent and inadvertent. If it's advertent, then we come in. If it's inadvertent, we don't. Everything is advertent.
No, yeah. That I was gonna get there. Like I said, I was gonna get there, but you can answer that.
Okay. So you're right. If it's an inadvertent, the department makes a decision. However, the department should be consulting with the burial council, MOKU, and in this case they did, but it's also, they should be consulting, if we know that there are cultural descendants that have been recognized, we should also be trying to consult with them. Now we need to have a cooperative landowner. Arguably, we only got 3 days to make a decision. But if we tell the landowner, it is really the right thing to do to have more time to make a determination, then I'm hoping that the landowners will give us the time to do that. But the law does create for us sort of like criteria that we should be looking at if the department decides. There is a presumption for preservation in place. It's not relocation, it's preservation in place. And in this case, they did agree to preserve it. It's just, now the difficulty is, what's appropriate mitigation measures? How close should the leach field be to the Iwi Kūpuna? Those kinds of things still need to be addressed. But we do have criteria upon which the department makes decisions, preservation in place, consulting with the burial council member, consulting with recognized descendants, maybe not for that kupuna, but for that ahupua'a. So those are generally the kinds of criteria that we look at. I know when we were in the car driving back, we talked about Kea having meetings with all of his burial sites specialists to begin to address some best management practices to do exactly what you're saying is, what are the criteria that the department should be looking at when they decide disposition for inadvertent discoveries?
I know you all have questions. We said we agreed to the rules, so we could really sit down.
So, I'm taking it from the Kupuna's view. You guys keep saying you guys figure out and determine who's the families, who's cultural right to take care of these kupunas. If you know that, then you know the bones are there. You know the names of these bones. Years people been told, oh no, that's not your kupuna. You don't even know because you're finding verdant and then inadvertent. Inadvertent to all of us is after the fact. It's not a special item. So my question is, you guys determine who's the qualified family members, and you say yay or nay, but you don't even know who the kupuna is in that ground. And this is from them. They want to know that answer. Everybody alive, two-legged, alive, is trying to solve this problem of desecration and defecation. That's two violations. So I'm sorry I stepped in, answer the question, because you guys don't know the people in the ground. So how can you determine who's right and who's wrong?
No. And you are right. We don't know who that kupuna is. But I will assure you, whether it's an inadvertent burial or previously identified, it is a burial. It is, especially if it's a Native Hawaiian burial, it should be given due respect. We just have different time periods. If it's previously identified, we can take a lot longer, we can play. Okay, and I appreciate that. That's what we need to know.
So that was a good segue into the next question.
Okay.
So this is the question that we've been asked, we get all these AIS reports from that same area. There's about 6 or 8, I don't know how many. So at what point does that become inadvertent when we know that there is a high concentration of burials in that area? How do we fix that? That you're not going to not find burials when you dig up in Naue. So that's the question, is how can we change that layering, that understanding of, oh, this is inadvertent when it's not? That's the question.
Yeah.
I told you it was getting there.
I know.
Nobody listened.
I know, you guys all ask good questions. That is very hard, because the statutes define previously identified and inadvertent. And I think when the law was established, the inadvertent and the previously identified was viewed as sort of this compromise between private landowners and Native Hawaiians' rights. So the law defines what a previously identified. So if we go back to Wainiha, the next door neighbor, very likely we're going to find burials here. But unless we do an archaeological inventory survey, and we only find it during construction, it's considered an inadvertent. However, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't give it due regard. So what we should be doing, and I think what we're collectively trying to do, is we should not be having inadvertents. What we should be having is an area that we know is sensitive, and we're working with DOH and the county on that. DLNR is trying to upgrade, their GIS maps. I think all of us know wherever you have sand, very likely, all over here, this North Shore, very likely. I mean, they had enough, so we know that we're going to find burials. But the law gives them different designations depending upon when we find them. So I'm not saying change the law, I'm saying change our practice. Mm-hmm. Our practice means we should be doing better. We should be trying to find them. We should be avoiding putting a septic tank or building where burials are. And the only way we're going to do that is by doing more archaeological inventory surveying.
Okay. And then the follow-up is, how will SHPD, and I guess it'll go by, don't worry, we can get this for everybody too. How will the department establish more transparent communication with cultural and lineal descendants and the community from these places upon discovering Iwi? And to get time, like you said, you have only 3 days. So how can we make sure that notification gets out to these people?
I know by the end of this, you guys are going to be tired of me talking, and I got 2 very learned staff here. But so I think we need to have better best management practices. When we should be having a list of all recognized, and I think we do, right, Kia? We do have a list of all recognized cultural descendants that we know around the state. As soon as we know there's an inadvertent, we should be going to that list and having either we, as our burial site specialist, or the contractor contacting Ohana and getting their input. We should be contacting the burial council member from that, or at least the burial council chair about that. So I think we have to institute better practices, more consistent, predictable practices, so that when an inadvertent is discovered, you can expect that we're going to try to reach out to the right people. We may not always do that, but I think this incident has heightened for us where the pukas are and how we need to fix them, because the communities are the ones that share the burden, right? Those of you who go out there and you protect these Iwi. So I think we are trying to do better. They're going to try to coordinate statewide, make available the lists, try to be more proactive. So we are trying to take different measures to address the pukas that we have seen in this situation.
So the follow-up with, they post notices in the newspaper for like when you're going to lose your land and quiet title kind of things, so is that a possibility to post notices for these discoveries, like to address, who the lineal and cultural descendants are? This is happening in your posts. Is that a possibility, and has it been tried? Has it been done? Is it a possibility?
I think we are open to all kinds of suggestions. The challenge is we have 3 days. It is unlikely we're going to be able to post a notice, but the minimum we should be able to do is call. Or you guys all have your own coconut wireless network. There's certain people you call in Wainiha who's going to call so-and-so, but we should at least be calling. I don't think we can publish a notice because by the time we publish it, it will be too late. The other challenge is, in general, burials are not. There's some confidentiality to them. So we post them on a public newspaper, everybody knows, and then you get maha'oi people coming to want to go find out what's going on over there. So we have to be a little discreet, but there's no reason we cannot be contacting people.
So publishing the permit, maybe?
I'll defer to DOH.
It's actually a letter for construction, approving construction. And we could probably, I'll check with our lawyers to see if we could put it on our website. Yeah.
Okay, any questions about this situation for SHPD and DLNR? You can come now. About this situation. If not, I'm moving to the planning department.
Pages I'm looking at. If it's a recognized descendant, wouldn't your agency already have their information? Don't you have their recognized person? I forget the word you use, but do you have their phone number, address?
So yes, so Kea did. So we have 8 recognized cultural descendants for Wainiha. So we are going to follow up. Either SHPD will do that, or the contract archaeologist will reach out to those descendants.
Okay, but you have their information already? Yeah.
Yes.
Wait, I do have one more. Oh, you can answer.
No, if you have a question, I'll follow up with like a thing that we're doing on Oahu. Well, not we, but the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission has an issue like this that they've identified in Kailua, and this may not be appealing to everyone, but one thing that the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission is thinking about doing is a proactive survey and some sort of designation as a district of some sort for the Kailua area for Iwi, so that whether that's a state register nomination as a district with historic burials in it, that way we don't have to rely on 6042 to trigger a project to come to SHPD. It's also triggered by 6010, which has a different level of evaluation, and that means that any project that happens on that property, whether a permit is issued or not, they have to come to SHPD for review. So that requires designation of a geographical area as a historic district. It may not be something that everyone thinks is appropriate, that descendants may not feel like is appropriate, but it's a mechanism from a program we already have that may help proactively address this issue. So that's all I was going to add.
So I've been, thank you, I've been listening very closely, and I just don't get a lot of things, but one thing I don't get is this 3 days thing. Like, what do you have 3 days to do to notify someone, or what is the 3 days?
3 days to make a determination based on the inadvertent discovery.
A determination of what?
The treatment of the burial, whether it's preserve in place or move.
Oh, so it's not talking about finding lineal descendants or something. You're just saying 3 days to figure out what to do.
No.
Okay, sorry.
Let me read. So this is from 6043.6. So if we find more than one burial, if we find more than 2 burials on an outer island, Kauai, we have 3 days to do the following. We got to contact the medical examiner, qualified archaeologist has to go out to the site, determine jurisdiction. Is it human? Is it over 50 years old? Yep. Is it ethnicity? Okay. Then we have to the department shall gather sufficient information, including oral tradition, to document the nature of the burial context and determine appropriate treatment of the remains. Is it to preserve the burial in place or to relocate it? A lot of times we will find an inadvertent, let's say, Board of Water Supply or your water departments, they're putting in a new water line, and they find a burial. It is probably not the right thing to leave that burial next to that water main, because that's probably subject to more harm. So a lot of times when we're finding inadvertent, it's in the context of a eminent construction project, Department of Transportation, Department of Border Waters, but we have to determine whether we're going to preserve that burial in place or we're going to relocate it. And then it says, members of the appropriate council shall be allowed to oversee the site inspection and, if warranted, removal. If we're going to determine removal, then there's other things that we have to do. Consultation with OHA, consultation with Hui Malama Iwi Kūpuna. We also have to contact other Hawaiian organizations on mitigation. So that's what we have to do in 3 days.
Okay, thank you, because I just know some people got arrested up there and it doesn't seem appropriate. And also, these people, if they have billions of dollars, they can do above ground sewage.
Okay.
Mahalo. The other question was, so this came up about, because is it the purview of only the burial council to recognize lineal and cultural descendants? There's no ambiguity in which SHPD can do such things. Okay, that was a question. Okay, mahalo. Anything else for this Hui? Oh, it can move.
The 3 days, no quorum, other departments sign off because the left hand's not talking to the right hand. Where was the common sense? Where was the common sense? The planning department has his hands tied. If he would have had, Mr. Hall, had the opportunity to take longer than 3 days without a quorum, perhaps a different decision would have been made. Common sense. It just seems like there was no common sense. And I'm not going to repeat what other people have said, but common sense needs to prevail. And if common sense was taken, this project would have been tied up for 2 or 3 years for that common sense to sink in for everybody. But this process happened fast. And without a quorum, the planning department should not be able to make a decision until you guys got your act together, because planning directors flying blind.
So I think the question will be, how can we amend the rules to make more than 3 days? I think that's the question that is the. Yeah, well, yeah, that means you guys all agree for the kuleana to go and push for it. So is there a way to amend the rules?
Go ahead. No,
chime in for a second? So, OHA did convene a burial sites working group at the request of the legislature back in 2022. And it identified a lot of the problems that we're having now. It consisted of a lot of burial council members, people who had participated in the makings of the rules as they are now, and people that have been involved. And we did identify a lot of suggestions in terms of rule changes that need to be made and statute changes that need to be made. Last session, a lot of these suggestions were put forth. 3 of them did pass into law that I thought were pretty useful, like landowners will now be fined if they don't register burials with the Bureau of Conveyances. If mitigations are not followed, it qualifies as a 6E violation. But there's still more work to be done. It's not things that can happen instantly. The Burial Sites Working Group report did identify the issue about inadvertence versus previously identified, and there were suggestions to amend the rules. But there's a rule-making process, and that has to be initiated, I think, by DLNR. There was an effort under the EGA administration. They convened a working group to try and amend the rules. OHA was part of that group, so was some folks from SHPD. But after you know, Josh Green took over, that mantle hasn't been taken back up. And so maybe that is something that should be explored. It's certainly something that's in the OHA report. And so we would like to see that if DNR could initiate it.
Okay, so we know what next steps are for that.
I want to add that it's not just like rule changing, it's statutory changing that needs to be done. So it would have to go for the legislature to amend 6E, which really defines inadvertent discoveries.
Aloha, my name is Helani Sonora Pale, EV protector from Wailupe, Oahu. I have a question about who made the final decision on this island to continue work. We need a name and a position. Also, what's her qualification to have made that final decision? Second of all, we also need to know, because there is no burial council, can you folks recognize descendants tonight? Can that be done tonight? Or can another burial council do that? Because right now that's hindering, like how you said and you stressed, they need to be recognized. Right now that is hindering people's ability to come forward and have a say in this process. So this is a huge roadblock right now. And what can be done tonight, since all of you guys are here, where the descendants are here ready with their paperwork. It's notarized and everything. What can be done tonight for them? Mahalo. Because right now, I think that's a huge roadblock for the community. Mahalo.
So thank you, Healani. I mean, we don't need to have them recognized to consider their mana'o. So if these families want to come forward and tell us what their recommendations are tonight, we will listen to them. It doesn't require recognition. It just, because these are inadvertents. So we're open to listening to what they have to say.
Sorry, one more. Oh yeah, so also a seat at the table. You know, they were told that they were not recognized descendants and therefore did not have a say on the treatment of the Iwi Kūpuna. And that's not right. That's ole pono. So we need from you, since you're here, Don Chang, and you have the mana, the power to do it, to say they will have a seat at the table going forward. I mean, they're not recognized, but they are from here and they do know their genealogy and they can trace it and they got their paperwork all makau already to turn that in.
So while we cannot recognize the descendants, because they're inadvertent, we will consider their mana'o. But and many of you may not be happy with this, but it will ultimately be the department's decision on inadvertent. But we are open to hearing all of the families who do have a connection to this place. What is your mana'o? Because the determination has been to preserve them in place, not to relocate them. But we also are interested in, like, what kind of mitigation measures? What's a buffer? What kinds of things do you want to see happen? So we are very open to hearing that.
And I would just add that if there's anyone that wants to be recognized either as a descendant or for their thoughts on treatment measures, please feel free to email either Kea or myself directly, or give us a call or pull us aside. We're happy to receive any comments from the community. And just to reiterate something that Dawn said, something you can do tonight, and we can send you the web address if you don't already have it, is to go to boards and commissions and please apply to be on the KLIBC, because we do have a couple of vacancies that we do need to fill that would help us keep quorum. The Kauai Lanai Island Burial Council?
KN.
Oh, Ni'ihau. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry.
KN. Yeah.
Wrong island.
So, and then I didn't hear if it was addressed, Auntie's question about who was the one that made the determinations, and I think, what was it, the cultural monitor, Milton, who gives him the authority and qualifications to make Yeah.
Okay. Aloha, koino manava akia. So, when I called KPD, I asked them for the records. So my question to, I guess, would be to Jessica, since you're the head admin of SHPD. So, SHPD permits the archaeologists, yes or no?
Yes, we give them a permit if they submit an application.
So who authorized the cultural monitor to make decisions? Because according to Milton on this project, what for call the cops? So that's not following due process or procedures, is that correct, yes or no?
I'm sorry, can you state that again? I didn't catch that.
So Milton made a comment when I asked him about the police report. He said, for what? No need to make a police report. So who gave him the authority to make these decisions?
Milton wouldn't have been given.
He doesn't have authority then. Yes,
Milton is a cultural monitor. He doesn't work for SHPD. So.
But he works for the archaeologist.
Yeah.
And the archaeologist is permitted through SHPD.
Yes, and the archaeologist would have needed to halt work and notify the police department and SHPD of an inadvertent find. And then SHPD would have needed to come out and verify.
So do you think that if there's transparency, then there might have been avoidances and not subordination? Because there's actually basically, there's subordinations in here. There's a lot of violations. So just wondering, because there was no response in the past 3 weeks from SHPD. So mahalo.
And then I think the other question is, there's reports were made and they, I guess that they didn't have any record of reports from KPD or SHPD about the incident. Like that's the other question is, where are the reports kept from this situation, both the KPD arrests as well as the reports about the discovery? Do you guys have that, and is it available to the public?
The arrests, we don't have anything to do with the arrests.
Well, and of reporting of the EV discovery as well.
In terms of the EV discovery, our staff keeps a record of the reports of the site visit that they make, of the assessments that are made. We, in our office, keep a record of that.
Okay. And is it available to the public to review said report?
Because of the sensitive nature of all burial sites, we don't broadly report out these reports. But if you were to make a UIPA request, we would be required to turn over that information. But we don't like to advertise the location of EV to prevent voyeurs or pot hunters or somebody who might have bad intentions from getting near it easily. So we have a record. Technically, it is a public document that if you request through a UIPA request, and we have a record of who's requesting it and who we give that record to, we would be required to turn that over.
Okay, so there is a process of getting.
There is a process, yes.
Mahalo, thank you. Moving on to county planning. Aloha ka'aina. So the question is, how will the planning department work with SHPD, lineal descendants, about establishing zoning restrictions for high sensitive areas to prevent these types of disasters in the future, like Naue?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, like I was saying in the opening, is that any ground penetration associated with any permit that the planning department triggers gets referenced to SHPD. So it's a very large net that gets cast automatically. And once SHPD has it, as far as when it comes to what happens with any type of archaeological resources and the surveys on that, we're gonna rely solely on their expertise. But, so the net gets cast fairly largely at this point. As I was saying in the opening, there's a puka in that net we found with this one, right? In that we've generally considered within the SMA permit process with renovations that a septic conversion, turning a cesspool into a septic system, is considered exempt from the permitting process. And so I've asked, like I said, I can't give a full commitment tonight, but like I have asked this past week for staff to really research that. And if that's an interpretation, fine, again, like I was saying, from an environmental standpoint, that makes sense why, previously the determination was made, consider septic conversions exempt, right? That makes sense from where it comes from. But if it was an interpretive stand, and in fact, we should be triggering permits on the actual septic systems in and of themselves, then that would close the puka and essentially would get referenced over to SHPD, and I think would essentially close that gap as far as inadvertent fine, because in this particular situation, what would have happened is we say it's not exempt, SMA permit is required, and then it gets routed to SHPD as well as OHA for their review and analysis. And then I can't speak for Jessica folks, but I imagine at that point potentially a AIS could be triggered for that specific property and work to find out whether or not there are EV in the ground, and would essentially take away this whole inadvertent fine discussion and allow a lot more of a timeline on the process.
Yeah, and just as a point of clarity to what you're saying, and I think what you're getting at is that if EV is identified during the archaeological inventory survey, the AIS stage, it is then treated not as inadvertent, but as previously identified. And therefore, the burial treatment measure, sorry, now I feel like it's echoing, would go before the KNIBC for determination on treatment, rather than just consultation with descendants and the regional rep.
Yeah. So, and then following up on that, so, are there certain processes that are required of these people? Like, we've been told that they can just study one little area on the property and that's enough. Are there required outlined processes for people when they're doing these test trenches or GPRs? Like, what are there requirements? And if not, is there a possibility of creating those requirements?
There's not like one rule in the regs or in SHPD rules that says if you're doing, sorry, I'm going to be scared of the microphone. If you're doing this project in this location, then you only have to test this one little area. It's really site-specific and project-specific in terms of what our staff recommends or requires of a project proponent. So if you're in a highly sensitive area where there is a high likelihood of encountering EV, then it is possible that you might just have to test certain areas, and it is possible that you might have to pre-dig your entire project area to assess whether or not you find EV before any construction can occur. And if EV is revealed, then you may have to relocate your project because you're still in the planning stage rather than in construction stage. You're still in your survey inventory identification step of the 6C review process and not in your project implementation, meaning you hadn't gotten SHPD's consultation letter yet, or the Kauai Historic Preservation Commission's letter, or whoever else is involved.
Does the county have any requirements too for their, like any requirements to either dig or GPR? Is there any requirements for that?
Nothing in our actual code, and that's why we'll rely pretty much exclusively on SHPD and their analysis.
Recommend just as a statement, GPR or ground penetrating radar is not necessarily accurate, and so doing GPR in advance won't guarantee that if EV are there that they will be discoverable. So just as it is a tool, but it is not necessarily a solution, just as a comment.
Yeah. Auntie wanted to know if it would be helpful if within those TMKs, I know you were addressing this was in the OHA report, but putting like either the body count or the amount of burial densities on these TMK so that these people know that they are in a high density area of burials.
So there's under Chapter 6C, normally we don't disclose exact location of burials. Mm-hmm. That is really the Kuli on the Burial Council can determine whether they're going to disclose that. But what we do have is we are now recording. So what should happen in this project, as all other projects? After you POW, when you submit your final report, we are going to require you to file a burial site component with a data recovery with the Bureau of Conveyances. So that runs with your land. Anybody who does TMK research should pick up that there are culturally sensitive resources on the site, including burials. So it's keeping, so a law has been passed that we can now record those documents. It is also, we can record other kinds of treatment plans. Buyer beware, you know what you're buying, but it's also, if an agency is doing a TMK research, they should be able to pick up that on this property is culturally sensitive resources, and they should require, or they should consult with SHPD. I also want to add one more point about the scope of an archaeological inventory survey. In general, we try to minimize the amount of area we're excavating. So in the case if the leach field and trench, septic tank, and connection lines, that is normally all that we will require, that we will require in the future. The testing should be done of probably, if you're going to do another Wainiha project, we would probably require pre-testing of the entire site so that there's no burials discovered. If we find them, in all likelihood, we're going to tell you redesign. So, yes.
Could we? I think we want a definition also of what constitutes high sensitivity. That's one of the questions. What is the correct definition of what constitutes high sensitivity? From each.
Go ahead. Yeah. Generally, and each island is different. On the island, the younger the island, the older the island, the more sand. Kauai, Oahu, Molokai, Maui, high sensitivity. You're building, in general, the rule is wherever Hawaiians lived, likely you're going to find burials. They didn't bury in a grave. They buried where they lived because Iwi Kūpuna was the mana of that ohana. So they would bury where they live, wherever they habitated. So so normally in an archaeological inventory survey, we're going to tell you, do an archaeological assessment. What was on this property before, pre-contact? Was there a trail that went through here? Did Hawaiians go back and forth? Were there places that they gathered? Are there indications that people lived on this site? If there are, it is very likely we're going to find burials. But in Hawaii, especially on those islands where there's sand, coastal areas, Hawaiians were not, they buried along the coast because that's where they lived. In the islands of Hawaii Island, we're probably finding a lot more burials in caves, tunnels, caves, because that's the geology, right? The geology it's a fairly new one. But we're also finding, so Waikiki, a lot of burials because that's where Hawaiians lived. But those are the kinds of research information that comes out when we do an archaeological inventory survey. The burden is on the applicant to do that kind of work, so we're making an informed decision. Because all of you are right. An inadvertent, we got 3 days. Hard to make an informed decision. The best case is preserve it in place, but in this case, we're also looking at what's appropriate mitigation measures.
Mahalo.
Wait,
we agreed on the rules, people.
Aloha mai kako. Puanani Rogers is my name. And about burials and sands, yes, all over Kauai. Nohili Dunes. In Mahaulepu, there was a huge battle. There's bones all over there. So I don't believe there is any such thing as inadvertent. That has to be changed. No exemptions either. Who has the power to exempt people that is doing something wrong? Now, all the pilikia started from the permitting, and that's where I want to go. The permits, ka'aina. You folks permit everybody, anything. I've known that, and I've seen that. So we got to put a bit, and stop you guys from doing all this permitting without checking with the community, looking at the aina, and doing your process to save us from getting arrested for protecting bones. Okay? That's it.
I thought there was going to be one question, but here's my ka'i, Auntie.
What I was going to say was, as soon as there are bones discovered, then withdraw that permit.
Yeah, Mahal, like I said, Auntie can, okay, but questions people need now. Auntie can, but no testimonials. We're trying to get questions.
Aloha. I hope I have what's a simple question. I pay attention to what comes out on the state of Hawaii's DLNR messaging, and so I see that we are halfway through the environmental assessment process for a new septic system, rather large, about 1/10 of a mile to the east. So I know that they're going to have to, it's in the Hanalei Colony Resort. I'm not trying to give that organization a hard time, but are we going to go through this again? Because I looked through the file, and it looks like they are going to have to move their septic system, and we are in that environmental assessment right now. I mean, in the waiting period. So what is happening relative to that? Because I would think anybody, the same people are related to the same people if we have any more. Iwi.
So the unlike this situation, the proposed septic large wastewater treatment system that's being proposed at Hanalei Colony Resort requires an SMA permit, requires at a bare minimum, it's in the environmental assessment stage right now. It's going to be posted very shortly. So if it's been posted, the environmental assessment anticipates a findings of no significant impact. But the whole purpose of the draft EA going out is to get comments from members of the public, from community, from cultural practitioners, from state and county agencies. And if it is in fact anticipated that there are impacts that cannot be addressed in the environmental assessment, then it gets bumped up to environmental impact statement, which is another 2 to 3 year process. So there's a public component to the Chapter 343 environmental review of the project. Whatever ultimately they have to do, whether it's an EA, environmental assessment, or environmental impact statement, after that process, then they still have to apply for a planning commission level permit, go through public hearings, notify the surrounding property owners. SHPD and other agencies have the opportunity to comment and provide further analysis. So it's a very public process.
Okay, so there's a lot more. Just as an individual council member, I just want to be in full disclosure to this room that there's another big project just a little bit away. So it sounds like there'll be plenty of public hearing time, but I didn't know if most people were aware of it.
Yeah, and council member, if I can just kind of add on to Kaina's, so we at SHPD, we are trying to be more proactive. We have generally not been reviewing at the EA level, at the 343 level. I've asked Jessica to work with her staff to start reviewing projects at the 343. If we're really trying to avoid, we should be part of the planning process, right? Not waiting until a permit comes in, because by that time it's too late. So, and that, we may end up doing a statutory change on this, but right now what we are trying to do in-house, so they've also told, so we were aware of this project because they've elevated looking at the OEQC bulletin. If there's EAs or anything 343 that might be in a sensitive area, we're taking a proactive look at it. So we are trying to do things at our end that is more administrative within our discretion. So I'm saying spend our time at the 343 level rather than at the permitting level, because by that time, no more options, right? Better at the planning stage. So we have taken, you know, your comment is well taken.
Thank you.
Kamakana.
Well, before I get back to what I was talking about, I'd like to thank the SHPD because they did send us notification about the EA for the Hanalei colony. We did not previously receive notification for that, so we do thank you for that. And we are actively reviewing that project. And there are genuine 6E concerns with that one as well. But going back to the topic of the concentration densities, when OHA reviews AISs, we do also, there are administrative rules that govern what's supposed to be inside of the report, things like predictive modeling and things like what's in the vicinity and what's been previously done in the area. And I think that helps us get an idea of making further recommendations on what could be done. And well, SHPD can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are rules that govern the report process, right?
Yeah, there's rules on what is required to be in a survey report that the applicant's consultant likely has to follow in order for it to be acceptable for our office to, well, in order for our office to accept it as a complete AIS or survey report.
Your microphone. Yep.
I just have a little comment on the Hanalei Colony Resort permit. They have septic tanks already. What they're needing to do is to create one unit, which I believe is going to be like a small treatment center or a treatment tank above ground. So there's a difference from, they know about Iwi Kūpuna and stuff, yeah? They have their septic tanks. This is another idea of ways of people that can, in a sensitive area, can change or modify their, to fit where they're living at, where their needs are. So I just wanted to clear that up, that I've been on it, and from what I understand, that's what they're trying to do, to create an above-ground treatment center or treatment facility.
I have to interject, but I don't want to interject. But unfortunately, the SHPD staff, and I believe Dawn, we're gonna have to leave in the next, I think, 5 minutes, right? 6:15, 15 minutes. So if anybody has questions that they have for us, please include them soon so that we can respond to them.
The what one?
Yeah.
You guys have to.
We have 6:15. We leave. We got like 20 minutes.
Yeah. Well, so that was one of the other questions. It's actually for county and SHPD, I guess, is the possibility of that. I know it might seem pedantic and redundant and kinds of things like that, but these are the questions, and I am reading the questions. It's the possibilities of that instead. That instead of septic and digging aina, what are the possibilities of above ground systems instead?
Yeah, I think that's.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be a DOH. That would be a DOH question. That's a good question. We are evaluating that, and we can get back to whoever asked that question. Should I get back to you?
No, you will.
Okay.
Over there.
Okay.
Yeah, so all these questions will be sent out. The answers, we're going to retype them. So whoever has an email list, mail, this will come out to you as well as launa time things after. So, my hopopo. Oh. Wait. Okay. Anakala and then.
Aloha. I've served on the Borough Council through 2 governorships. I've worked construction all my working career. That's like 55 years. I've encountered many kupuna iwi in my years, and thanks to people like Palikapu who formed the Burial Council, we were able to have a process. That was my motivation for serving on the Burial Council. Serving on the Burial Council, we wonder why we're having a problem here on Kauai. It's a real thankless, hard job. And we as local people, this is my question, and this is my question to all of us here. My good friend said, let the doers do, and the talkers talk, and the doers do, okay? So my challenge, it's a question to everybody here. We know that there's vacancies. The problem was, it's got to start at the top. We local people, we always sit with our backs to the wall every time. So we gotta get out of that reactive position and be more proactive in what's going on. So that is my challenge and my question to all the health department, SHPD, everybody that has the power to come up with solutions, because this is the same questions I've heard 30 years ago, So my question is to you folks is, our challenge is, what are we going to do? Serve on the burial council, be a part of, run for politics, do something. But we're not doing anything by being in this reactive position. So I'm sorry, it's my Kūpuna, my Kūpuna coming out.
We're having a lot of these Kūpuna moments that we're not following the rules. But off of that though, the good that's I can segue a little bit with that is, how do we make the process for application? I know that the governor has to sign off in ALA, but how do we expedite that process so it can get there to that point? Is there a way for SHPD to expedite that process so it's not like you're writing a mo'olelo about your the ancient days and to get an application in?
Well, what I've been recommending, what I've been recommending to anybody who wants to be on any board or commission that SHPD oversees is, once you apply, please email Kea or myself and let us know that you applied. And then we will call our contact at boards and commissions up and say, hey, we know of an applicant, please process their application as quickly as possible. So the worst thing that could happen is for you to apply and then for it to just sit there. We don't want that. We don't want that to happen. We want all of our boards fully staffed. So notifying us as soon as you do that means that we'll give them a call and then push them to get your application through. And we've been that's been a pretty good methodology over the last couple weeks and months for our other boards and commissions that we're trying to get quorum for, because you are not the only one.
Many people have signed up to be on the burial council, but they didn't qualify or they were turned down.
Okay.
So this is another question going on again that we're putting out to the public. And Dinani did. He didn't. So a lot of people.
And I think that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to address that issue. And Anakala, nice.
Yeah, aloha. My name is Kapu, and I flew in from Lahaina. We've been kind of in the trenches for a long time, so this is really concerning for me, because we've been finding a lot of fragments of EV, especially after the fire. We're doing a lot of the cleanup. Don literally summed it up that it starts with the planning department on the 343, which would trigger something that would require that the county planning department get the state involved on some kind of monitoring process before everything starts. So that's kind of one recommendation, because we in Maui, myself and my wife, we go to the planning department and we look at all, when developments come in on the TMKs, the checklist of what they're required to do. And if they're not required to do certain things, then we put it to the county to make sure why they're exempt from this. I think the exemption and what I'm hearing from this body really concerns me a lot. It really concerns me a lot, is because what we're talking about is trying to buy and resolve to the problems that exist right now. And those problems has existed for over 20, 30 years already. I sat on the burial council for 8 years. 4 of those years I was the chair. And right now we're proactive of being involved, really being involved in the trenches to make sure that we protect and malama our kupuna in every way. So when we start talking about the BSC ADRP plan, the burial site component plan, that's a step in the right direction on a community level. Not the archaeological level, not the certified level, not the level where people are supposed to be experts in the things that they do. It boils down to the community level when you start looking at preservation and protection of Iwi Kūpuna. So I'm glad to be here. It's really concerning, like I said again, because whatever triggers here, especially after the governor made his proclamation, I think that's why we're going through all these complications now, especially when we're talking about SMAs on shorelines and SMAs on flood projects, because we're seeing them all. We're seeing our community, get down degraded to where a lot of the commercial businesses along Front Street, which we're kind of a little bit happy about, ain't gonna be able to build back. but it's the residents that we feel very, very concerned about, because these SMAs that change was the trigger from the governor, which I think that's going to be a statewide problem for all of us. So I hate to say, brother, the ball is in your court on the 343. If something triggers that may be concerning, that information should be submitted to the State Historic Preservation Division so they can be all on it. So, mahalo no kako.
Hello. Okay. Mahalo anakala, and like I said, there's only a few kupuna cards that is allowed in this place. I want questions because our SHPD team is going to be leaving, and after they leave, that is your launa time that you can come up and talk to those that are going to be here, so you can have maybe have questions for planning, for OHA, for DOH. Are you guys catching a plane too? Yeah. Oh, they're all on the same flight. So you have for Ka'aina and Kamakana Yen, you guys can stay and talk to that. They also have, you can put your questions on there. Like I said, we are going to compile everything, those that cannot be answered tonight, and we will send them, and we will send the responses later. This is not the only one and only. We are going to have more. You cannot solve all the problems of the Hawaiian Lahui verse tonight, but we can get a start on that. So mahalo for that. And here she has her question is next.
No, Kamealoha, can I say one thing too? And I do apologize. I know this is so rude when we got us Honolulu people have to go catch our flight. I apologize in advance, but we will leave, or maybe they can let you know, or OHA, who's hosting this, send us whatever questions you have, either SHPD or myself, and we will address them. We'll send them back to you. But so even if we're leaving, please continue to keep sending us questions. And I really appreciate this engagement. You know, it's hard, what'd I say? No grumble if you're not gonna participate. So all you guys here, you have the right to grumble, because at least you participated, but thank you for letting us be here tonight. So go ahead, the next question.
Yeah.
Aloha mai kako na Kaiaulu Vilatora ko'i noa. My question is for Don Chang and also SHPD. I know that you spoke a lot about best management practices among your agency. What I feel like there is a lack of trust, really, between the community and these agencies because of this long history of trauma that we are continuously to see replayed into this really bad cycle. But what I would like to kind of hear from you folks tonight before you folks leave is that within your agencies, are you guys going to be holding individual agents accountable for their violations of these damages that have already occurred and have been occurring for decades already? So that is my question for you folks. If you guys are really serious about showing the community that we can actually trust that you guys will do your duties, your fiduciary duties, and in protection and preservation of our Kanaka Hawaii, our Kumuwaivai, and our Iwi Kūpuna, we want to know that these people who were involved in these situations will be held liable, because in essence, every single time you disturb Iwi Kūpuna, you disturb Ike Vaivai, you disturb the pilina that mo'opunas will have in the future, and that is just a limitation for the generations. So I can let you answer that.
I'll take a stab, but personnel matters are handled by the department, by the administrator. So I would urge you, if you have information related to lack of compliance by any one of our staff people, you should let our department know. But I'll let Jessica, because I'm trying very hard not to micromanage, and that's the kuleana of the administrator.
But I mean, as a Luna, could we have you pledge tonight that you will hold that as a high priority moving forward because you want to be preventative?
I will assure you, we do, and we are doing that. So you bring this to our attention, we will follow up.
I wanted to add a small comment. So I know there's been a history of, the mistrust that you mentioned, but SHPD and DLNR, we have new leadership, and I think from what I've seen, they're willing to take a little bit more aggressive, proactive approach at ensuring historic preservation in general. you know, between the chair, our new administrator, and well, myself for History and Culture branch, you know, I see something a little bit more progressive than the leadership we've had before. We're trying to establish good communication. We have some new staff on the islands that I think are working with the community pretty well. I think me and Stacy text every day. So I think, you know, we really are trying to make improvements in the communication that we have with the other agencies, with the community, and even, you know, for me, reaching out to both Jessica and Dawn, you know, the very open door policy. So when I'm stuck with issues, you know, I do rely on them for help and assistance, and they're always there to provide it. So I hope that kind of direction and guidance really carries on, so that, you know, we can improve this relationship we have with the overall community.
And I mean, just as to add to what Dawn and Kaya have said, I think that I take any report of a violation very seriously. And I know in the past, because of staffing or, you know, rules wise, it's been hard to go after certain violations. I think we have a clear path for that now. If you're talking about a project proponent, if you're talking about our staff people, we definitely hold our staff people to a higher level of administration of their jobs. And so whatever we have to do to work with them to make sure that they're doing their job, we'll do. And so if you have you know, anything you'd like to talk to me about, anything you'd like to talk to Kaya about, please let us know.
And just my last question for you, how many violations would a archaeologist or a person that works under your department need to have to actually be flagged from doing newer projects in the future?
I think that's a really difficult question to answer, because it's the investigation of the violation and figuring out what is going on. But if there is like a real violation occurring, then we would have to follow the HR processes of the state to follow up on how to respond to that. But in terms of them continuing to do work, that it is foreseeable that we would reassign that work to somebody else if a violation had occurred and there's an issue with their performance moving forward. So it's hard to discuss these things openly in a meeting because they're personnel related issues, and people do have a right to be treated as a human being, and us working through whatever the issue is with them privately. But as a matter of course, if we need to find other staff who might better represent an area of work, we can definitely do that.
It's all bullshit.
Kalamai. Ana kala. We came back of 3 days.
No, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. She been saying hey, this is all by This is the ones right here. These guys are the 50 party. These guys don't do shit. They don't do shit. All of them taking Evie on Maui. All of them gone. That's your guys' fault.
Na ohana a ole mai ka ikela ana. Okay? A ole loa. O ha'ena o halelea keia. He wahi ele ale ai kanaka. No leila mai hana pela. Okay? I promised that I would, you know, not keep Francis under control. So I will give 2 more questions. I have a question, so there will be actually 3, but Tito was waiting a long time, so I'm going to let her do her nina.
Aloha, quick question. This is a personnel question. O ku'ulei kia mo'ai ko uinoa. The term cultural monitor has been brought up through the course of this meeting, and you had mentioned that there was a talk of archaeology and who was on site. My main question is, do you have cultural monitors under SHPD? And if there are positions, are there positions available for Kauai? And then also, what is the requirements, or what kind of experience are you folks looking for when trying to fill those positions? Part of the reason why I asked that question, I worked in construction just like the gentleman over there. I work in actually civil construction, so I've been working in this industry for almost 10 years now and have been approached by the state of Hawaii through the Department of Transportation to apply to be a cultural monitor on the island of Kauai for specific state projects. Submitted my resume and was actually kind of presented to the contractors as one of the recommendations for the state. So that's something that I've been experienced in as a cultural practitioner. Not saying that I would necessarily want to apply, but just questioning, one, there's been that terminology and people have been kind of showing up on site and making those statements, and how do we know that they are actually part of SHPD and what their kuleana is? So those are my questions, kind of a lot. That was like 4 different things that I asked.
No, that's okay. They're all really good questions. In terms of SHPD, we have burial site specialists who respond when an inadvertent discovery is encountered or revealed. And then we also have cultural historians who also help facilitate with the descendancy applications and things like that. We don't currently employ or have the positions, the technical HR position description for cultural monitor. I think that is something that maybe we could pursue, but part of the value of the work of folks like Keamu Kukapu and those of you who do cultural monitoring is oftentimes you're contracted by a project proponent and you are an independent entity that doesn't work for the state. You're getting maybe paid by a project proponent, but your opinion, what you see, what you witness while you're doing your job is independent as a subject matter expert, as a descendant, as somebody who is there, and your job is to look out for Iwi and to take care of them during the construction process. So I think that if that were a position at SHPD, we'd have to consider like what is the shape of that position. But currently we don't have cultural monitors on staff.
Can I follow up on that question?
So only follow up.
Hi.
We're cultural monitors for Lahaina's fire. And we started off with 10 and ended up with 65 cultural monitors. So what it takes to be a cultural monitor was the encouragement from State Historic Preservation Division, because we were going through a lot of devastation, and also the county also requested that Naue County or Maui be cultural monitors for over 1,400 homes that burnt. There's certain requirements that we're required to do. One of them is HAZWOPER training. That's 40 hours of HAZWOPER training. Hazmat training. We also got to do training in identifying different toxins and different antigens when we're in the burn. We got to learn how to put on PPE equipment to make sure that we're safe going in and going out. And we also established a code of conduct for not just our team, but everybody that comes. So in the beginning, we had over 1,900 workers coming from all over the state, as well as the international arena coming to help. We set the standard as cultural monitors in Lahaina to make sure that everybody is compliant to the rules. And the rules is really simple, that if you don't know anything about Lahaina, you need to do cultural sensitivity training, which they have to go through me too as well. So word of wise to everybody wanting to entertain in that idea, put your packet together of what should be compliable. There's federal agencies. In fact, right now, we're running 5 federal contracts. Now, as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, we're also recognized under the federal government as a bona fide NHO, and highly recommended by FEMA and the Corps of Engineers. Sometimes some people, they look at kind of bad that, a Kanaka gotta stoop to that level, but if we didn't step in, who would step in? So that's taking on the responsibilities of making sure that the residents of our town are well taken care of, because we're the last stand when it comes to the protection and preservation of our integrity. So I hope that kind of gave some people some good ideas.
If I can just add something more. Keamoku is very humble, but part of part of the purpose of a cultural monitor is that hopefully they're from the area. They know who the families are if anything is found. They know what to look for. They know what the sensitivities of the area are. So they bring a very different expertise than an archaeologist. They are schooled in indigenous knowledge, Native Hawaiian cultural practices. So we do look to cultural monitors, although we don't have any on SHPD or DLNR, but we do look to it is a benefit for the project proponent to have a cultural monitor. So with that,
we've been asking for them more frequently too, particularly of federal projects, because under state projects review, there isn't really a process for that yet. But our federal agencies who have to comply with the federal historic preservation policy, like FEMA, have been receptive to it. And because of that and the success that we've been, unfortunately been having to receive from Naakane, it's become invaluable for paths forward. So please, any encouragement for that. I think it's necessary and great, so.
Okay, so last question before they gotta go run and we pull it to close. You guys will still have planning and OHA here, but the question is, what is the status of the project now? What is the next steps? What's happening down in Naue?
Let me just briefly go over that. So we went on the site today. Tank number 3 has been completed and they found no burials there. Tank number 2, we found burials, in situ burials, although the site has been, the leach field has been covered. Tank number 1, it is still, the leach field is still open. It is still an open area, an open construction site. While we may have made a determination to preserve in place, SHPD has told the landowner that they have to complete a burial sites component of a data recovery plan. That plan requires what's appropriate mitigation. So this meeting is very helpful for us to hear what some of you have said about mitigation. Should there be Iwi Kūpuna next to a leach field? Okay, you tell us no, but you need to let us know. So that's the kinds of, we also want to talk to family members. So KEA is going to provide those lists to either they are going to follow up or the contractor is, but it is still an open, the permit has not been closed. They still have to complete. We have not given them permission to complete everything. We're still completing our investigation and our determination on mitigation. So I would urge all of you, if you have mana'o to share with us about what mitigation should be, then let us know. We will also reach out to the families. But that's the current status of the project. It is still, so DLNR has asked the landowner, who's been very cooperative with us, they're going to give us a time to do that kind of cultural consultation. So I would urge again, all of you, please let us know.
So I know that was the last question, but last comment goes to Megan.
Yep.
Hi. Okay, we did walk the site, but for those of you that have not been on the site, I want it to be very clear that I know you were using numbers and I didn't really understand that myself, but when you walk onto the property, there are 2 burials, 2 humans buried with a septic tank in their grave. There is an adult and a child laying right on top of each other. They don't come with C1, 2, F, whatever the talk is here. There are 2 humans that are buried. There is a tank in their grave with them. There's a piece of plyboard that's called their buffer between the tank and them. That is not okay, and it's never been okay. Then there's a tank across from them on the left. That grave, inadvertent, 1 grave was disturbed. Then 2 were seen in the wall. That stopped. That was all found on 1 day. We stopped project that day. Then when they decided to start digging again without us there, knowing that we said our descendants from this area say, do not put the tanks in their grave. We must redesign or figure out what the buffer might be for this one. So we're going to keep you. So Chris, he says, yes, we're going to keep you informed and this, that, and the other. When can we close the hole? Because our Iwi Kūpuna are exposed, okay? So then there's a wall. We had as best we could secure them for the time being. They were left like that for almost 2 months. They changed the direction of the tank hole so that they could fit the tank in with them, where they then discovered another body. Now, they had done a GPR, ground penetrating radar. There were flags now saying that there are graves here. They are called inadvertent too. Then, because the wall was out for so long, then that whole wall caved in and 2 more bodies that we didn't know fell out. So now we have 6 burials on one side, 2 on another. The leach field that was dug when we were not there as well also had remnants of possibly a baby and other parts of a human. We don't know, but that has also been covered. We were arrested on Friday, and they dug aggressively another leach field. The culture monitor was not watching that. They were moving dirt from holes to holes and here to there, and it's on video. And so I don't know where we can keep calling this inadvertent, but I want to find a way forward, because it's not okay with us, it's never been okay with us to put the septic tanks in graves of our kupuna. It doesn't matter what culture they are. It doesn't matter if they're white, black, Japanese, haole, it doesn't matter. They're humans, and they're resting in place, and we are literally moving them on the side so you can put a septic tank. And it should never be okay to remove them. And I don't know how we would decide that in 3 days. We need more time to gather that information, that mo'olelo, from the families of that area. And we were involved from day one within 15 minutes of the first find. We're now being trespassed every time we go on there. They're threatening to call the police on us. So we will see this all the way through, regardless if we're going to get trespassed and arrested. So come time for sifting of that, we are asking that you remove those tanks out of the graves, sift that, make pono that, sift the entire leach field that's been now aggressively covered, and then sift the open leach field that has a pile. We have found Iwi Kūpuna, a portion of the skull laying on top of the pile. Another one when Mayor was there and taking ho'okupu from Captain Green, he was in a very low position and saw it right there on the ground. It's very much of a mess, you know? So a right way forward, we need to sift, and we need to sift all of that. So that's what our ask is, and it's the same ask that we had from the very beginning on day one. We are speaking for our community and the descendants of that area to stand down, and we would handle it, and we are still asking the same thing today. So thank you guys all for coming. I think it's amazing that you all are here to listen to us. You know, some of it may have felt like blah, blah, blah and excuses, but I hope in all of that we can come to something, figure it out, and find a way forward, a new way forward, because I think it's been made clear that what's happening now isn't working, whether it's SHPD or DLNR or county or whomever, it's not working, and our kupuna are not being honored. So thank you.
Mahalo, and with that mana'o to ponder, we'll do a quick, I'm going to do a pule ho'onola. Okay, we're going to pule ho'onoa, Kūkā iluna. Ua wehea kea ia ka ho'onoa o nā wahia pau e ala e ala e. Ua wehea kea ia ka ho'onoa o nā wahia pau e ala e ala e. Ua wehea kea ia ka ho'onoa o nā wahia pau e ala e ala e. Mahalo, those who can stay. Launa with the poe. Everyone back to Mahalo, 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 mahalo. But it's not